In this lesson, we're going to be modeling a soccer ball, or a football for some of you, not because a soccer ball is a super common shape that you're going to have to model all the time, but because it's a really good example of how modeling is sometimes like a puzzle, and how all of the tools that we've learned so far in this course are all the different keys that can help us solve it. The first question we should always ask is, what primitive should we start with to make this as easy as possible? And I'd say the main feature of a soccer ball is that it has these pentagons that are kind of evenly spaced around, with some of the white space divided up in between them. Luckily, we actually have a round primitive that has some pentagons. That is the icosphere. So let's delete our cube here, and I'll hit Shift-A and add an icosphere. And if we hit Tab to go into edit mode, you'll see that some of the vertices are connected to 6 other vertices, but some vertices are connected to 5. And if I just go to face select mode and box select the vertices that have 5, you'll see that they form a very similar pattern to a soccer ball, but they're all really close together. There's only one triangle in between them. So I can add more faces in between these areas by subdividing. So I'll select everything with A, right click, and subdivide. Now that's going to make everything faceted, and we're going to lose our sphere shape, but we can go to the subdivide options in the redo panel and set the smoothness to 1. Now if I were to select some of these, there's one there, and there's also one down here. These look pretty good, but now there's too much space in between, and if I hit Ctrl+ to grow the selection, now there's again too little space. So we want something right in between. So what I'll do is I'll just Ctrl-Z to undo that, right click and subdivide again, but this time I'll make 2 cuts instead of 1. Then if I find one of those pentagons, and find another one, and find a third one down here, I can grow the selection, and that looks like just the right amount of space in between. Now I don't want to manually find all of these all the way around the ball, so I'll go to vertex select mode and select the center of one of these, and use our handy select similar, and choose amount of connecting edges, because all of the vertices that we want to find are connected to exactly 5 other vertices, while the rest of the vertices on the model are connected to 6. So now we have all of those corners, we can hit Ctrl+ twice, and then to separate these from the rest of the ball, I'm going to do an inset. So I'll hit I to inset, move this in just a little bit, and left click to confirm. And let's go with a thickness of 0.02, just so we can be consistent when we make more insets on the other spaces. Now I don't want to have to go through and reselect all of these later, so I'll go to my mesh data properties in the properties editor and add a new vertex group. And these are going to be the black spots, so I'll call this one black spots, and click assign. And then we may as well make these black so that it's easier to see. So I'll go to my materials in the properties and click new. And this first one will be the white part of the ball, so I'll just name this white. And then I'll create a new material slot and create a new material as well. And I'll call this one black, and then click assign. I'll make the surface black, and down under the viewport display, I'll make that black as well. Okay, perfect. Now I want to inset the rest of these shapes, but I can't do it all at once, because if I do that by selecting the centers of them and then Ctrl+ to grow the selection, then I'm not going to get a split right in between. They'll just inset all as one. So I want to select a bunch that are not connected to each other. So I'll select one there, and then I'll skip over to different parts of the ball, select one there, select a middle over here, and just any that aren't touching any other spot. Let's do one there, and one there, down there. Okay, I think that should work. Then with some of those selected, I'll hit Ctrl+ twice, and then let's just double check to make sure that none of these are touching. There we go. So I'll hit I to inset, set that to 0.02, and then I'll go back to my data properties and add a new vertex group, and I'll call this one white spots. Then I'll also click assign, and then so I can better see which ones I've already dealt with, I'll just go to mesh, show hide, and choose hide selected, or you can use the hotkey H. Then I'll go and grab some of the rest of these by just shift selecting the center point of all of these. One there, and I think that's as many as I can grab here. So again, Ctrl+ twice, I to inset, set the thickness to 0.02, assign that to the white spot's vertex group, and hit H to hide. Then I'll grab the remainders. That one and that one. Let's see, did I miss any? I don't think so. Control plus twice. I to inset. 0.02. Assign that to the white spot's vertex group. And then since that's the last one, I'll hit Alt H to unhide. Now we just need to take all of our spots and inflate them a little bit. So I'll take my black spots and click select to select those as well. So we're selecting everything except the line in between, and then I'll hit S to scale this up. Just like so. And now we have a pretty decent soccer ball. I'll right click and shade smooth. And if we want to really smooth this out, then we can add a subdivision surface modifier. So I'll go to the modifiers tab and add a generate and subdivision surface. I'll crank that up to 2. And you can see that's turned our nice geometric patches into blobs. So what we'll do is use creasing here and sharpen up some of those corners. Creases are something that we'll talk a bit about more later on in the course, but for now just know that a crease is something that sharpens up the edge of a subdivision surface. So I can go to edge select mode here, and we want to sharpen up these corners. So I'll select one, and then we need to do this in our sidebar. So I'll go to view and sidebar or hit the hotkey N. And then under the item tab, go down to edge data and crease and set that to 1. And that works pretty well, but the material isn't spreading all the way down to that crease. So let's go to our vertex groups over in our data properties and choose our black spots. Choose select, and then just hit Control plus to grow our selection one time. Go back to the materials tab and choose assign again. There we go. Now we can see how when we sharpen that up, that's going to look a lot better. But we want to do that for all of the corners on our patches, and I don't want to select all of these individually. So what we can do is go to edge select mode, and if I select one of these and hit Shift G, then we can see all of the different attributes that we can select by. I think the one most relevant to us is face angles, and we'll see if that works. That looks like it got most of them, but if I go to wireframe view, it didn't quite get all of them. I can try to increase the threshold here, and I'll hold down Shift to go a little bit slower. But you can see that that does start to get more, but then it also introduces a bunch of other edges that we don't really want to sharpen. So we might have to find another approach. Another thing that I think would work is to find all of the edges that have a similar length, because all of these do have the same length. So if I do Shift G and select by length, then we have selected all of the correct edges, but we've also selected these ones in between that we don't want. But we can always do another selection to unsharpen those later. So for now, let's just set the crease to 1 on all of these edges, and then find a way to select just these in the middle that we want to then uncrease. Because if we leave them creased, it doesn't look too bad, but it's not perfectly smooth, and I'd really like it to be. So let's select one of these and see if any of our Shift G select similar will help us out. We can't do length since that's how we got there in the first place, but I'll try face angles again. If I increase this threshold, then we'll start to select more and more of our object until all of these become selected. And it doesn't really matter what else is selected because we're just going to uncrease. We just need to make sure that these 3 are not selected. So we can bump this up a pretty good amount. And as long as none of those are selected, then we should be safe. So then I'll just take the mean crease for all of these, mean being average, and set that to 0. Okay, so now we've removed the crease from all the areas where we don't want it, and our soccer ball is looking pretty good. I'll just go back to my subdivision surface and bump that up just to make sure that everything looks pretty smooth, and this is actually looking really good, which might be a surprise to some of you since this model includes a lot of triangles. But again, that's something that we'll talk about later on in the course when we talk about subdivision surfaces. There's a lot more that we could do here, including sharpening up these patches and trying to convert this more into a quad model. The last thing that I'll do here is sharpen this up just a little bit more. And the way that I'll do that is also crease all of the edges right in those seams by just selecting one of them, hitting Shift G to select similar, and again choose face angles. If we go to wireframe view here, then we can see that that's selected exactly all the right edges, and then set the crease to 1. All right, that's looking nice and sharp. But then if we want to, we can bring all of the perimeters of these patches closer together. So first, let's select all of them by going over to our object data properties and selecting our black spots as well as our white spots. And if I hit S to scale, that's going to just scale it out from the very center of all of these. But if you remember from the Blender basics, we can also change our pivot point, which in this case is going to be really helpful. Right now it's set to median point, which is just the very average of the entire selection. But I can also set this to individual origins, which is going to be the middle of all of our different selections. So then with individual origins, I can just hit S to scale and bring these all closer together. So I don't need it to be too extreme. I don't need it to be overlapping or anything, but I'll just bump that up just a little bit and then set that back to median point. Hit tab to go to object mode, and I'd say we're looking pretty good. Oh, and before I forget, it's always best to model to real world scale when possible, so that when you import this to any other scene, then it's just going to fit right away. And an average soccer ball is about 22 centimeters or 8.5 inches-ish. So over in the sidebar, let's set our scale to 22 centimeters and then hit Control A and apply scale. In this lesson, we did use a lot of tools, but you might have noticed that some of the most important ones were actually selection tools, and the rest were pretty basic. So definitely don't underestimate the power of selection, and also notice how this was only as easy as it was because we started with the right primitive. Starting with a good low poly object that has the right features and landmarks built in will make it creating a higher poly, more complex model a whole lot easier.